The first thing I noticed was the smell of burnt rubber and ozone. It was a Tuesday morning, just past 7, and I was walking down the gravel path toward my workshop on the far side of the hill. The workshop sits about 300 yards from my house, tucked into the base of a slope that used to be part of an old quarry operation back in the 1940s. My grandfather bought this land in 1952, and he built the service tunnel in 1954 to run maintenance carts and small equipment between the workshop and the main road without having to drive all the way around the hill. The tunnel is narrow, maybe 8 feet wide and 9 feet high, lined with corrugated steel and concrete, and it runs straight through the hill for about 210 feet. It was never meant for public use. It was never meant for neighbors. It was a private maintenance access corridor, and the only entrance on the far side was secured with a heavy-duty padlock that my grandfather installed himself. I still have the key on a ring in my kitchen drawer. When I got to the tunnel entrance that morning, the lock was gone. Not broken, not cut and left hanging. Gone. The hasp was still there, but the lock had been removed cleanly, and the steel door was propped open with a chunk of broken cinder block. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the open door, and then I stepped inside. The concrete floor was covered with tire marks. Not bicycle tires, not wheelbarrow tires. Wide, knobby golf cart tires, dozens of them, overlapping in black streaks that ran the entire length of the tunnel. The air was thick with the smell of electric motors and hot rubber. And along the left wall, about halfway down, I saw the damage. The utility conduit that runs along the base of the wall had been cracked open. It's a 4-inch PVC pipe that carries fiber optic lines, a low-voltage control cable for my well pump, and a secondary power feed to the workshop. The pipe was shattered in 3 places, and I could see the bright orange fiber line exposed, kinked at an ugly angle. Someone had been driving golf carts through my tunnel, and they had been doing it long enough to break things. I pulled out my phone and took photos. I took photos of the missing lock, the propped door, the tire marks, the shattered conduit, the exposed fiber line, the cinder block, everything. I didn't know who had done it yet, but I knew one thing for certain. Whoever cut that lock had no idea what was buried in the walls of this tunnel. And they had no idea that I still had the original utility map from 1954, signed by my grandfather and filed with the county, showing every single line, every single pipe, every single wire that ran through this hill. That map was sitting in a fireproof safe in my workshop, and it was about to become the most important piece of paper in this entire neighborhood. Before I explain what happened next, tell me where you're watching from. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 41 years old, and I'm a retired utility technician. I spent 20 years working for a regional power company, running underground lines, reading utility maps, and repairing exactly the kind of damage I was looking at in my tunnel. I retired early 2 years ago after a back injury, and I moved full-time into the house my grandfather left me. The property is 6 acres on the edge of a planned community called Oak Haven Estates. The HOA was formed in 1998, long after my grandfather bought the land, and our property was never part of the HOA. My grandfather refused to join. He signed a non-membership agreement in 1999 that the developer accepted, and that agreement has been recorded with the county ever since. I live here alone. My wife passed away 3 years ago from cancer, and this property is where I came to heal. The workshop was her favorite place. She used to sit on a stool by the door and watch me work on old radios and small engines. She called it the cave. I still have her stool. I still have her coffee mug on the shelf. The tunnel was part of our life together. We used to walk through it on rainy days just to hear the echo. I'm not a confrontational person. I keep to myself. I pay my taxes. I maintain my fences. I don't attend HOA meetings because I'm not a member. I don't use the clubhouse, the pool, or the golf course. I wave at neighbors when I see them, and I mind my own business. All I wanted was to be left alone with my memories and my workshop. But someone had cut my lock, opened my tunnel, and turned my private service access into a golf cart shortcut, and I was about to find out exactly who. I walked back to the house and pulled up my security camera footage. I have 3 cameras on the property. One covers the driveway, one covers the workshop entrance, and one covers the far side of the hill where the tunnel exits onto a small access road that connects to the main neighborhood loop. The camera on the far side is partially hidden in a tree, and it runs on a solar panel. I checked the footage from the past week. On the previous Thursday, at 2:47 in the afternoon, a white golf cart pulled up to the tunnel exit. The cart had a small HOA logo on the side. A woman got out. She was in her late 50s with short blonde hair, wearing a pink polo shirt and white capri pants. She walked up to the tunnel door, examined the lock, and then pulled out a pair of bolt cutters from the back of the cart. It took her less than 30 seconds to cut through the shackle. She tossed the broken lock into the bushes, pulled the door open, and propped it with a rock. Then she got back in her cart and drove through the tunnel. I watched her emerge on the other side, near my workshop, and continue down the path toward the main road. Over the next 5 days, the footage showed at least 24 golf carts using the tunnel. They came through in the morning, around 8, and again in the afternoon, around 4. They were using it as a shortcut to the clubhouse. The normal route to the clubhouse from the east side of the neighborhood is about 1.5 miles, winding around the hill on paved cart paths. Through my tunnel, the distance was cut to less than 1/4 mile. Someone had discovered the shortcut and decided to share it. I recognized the woman with the bolt cutters. Her name was Karen Whitmore. She was the president of the Oakhaven Estates HOA, and she lived in a large stucco house on the golf course, about 1/2 mile from my property line. I had met her exactly once, 2 years ago, when she knocked on my door and asked if I wanted to join the HOA. I politely declined and showed her a copy of my grandfather's non-membership agreement. She had smiled tightly, said something about community spirit, and left. I hadn't spoken to her since. Now she had cut my lock and turned my tunnel into a public thoroughfare. I didn't call her. I didn't confront her. I didn't post on the neighborhood Facebook group. I put the footage on a USB drive, printed out still frames of her cutting the lock, and added everything to a folder. Then I called my friend Mike, who runs a small utility contracting business. Mike came out that afternoon and inspected the damage. He confirmed that the conduit was shattered, the fiber line was compromised, and the control cable for my well pump was showing intermittent faults. He estimated the repair cost at around $4,000, not including the cost of replacing the lock and cleaning the tire marks off the concrete. I asked him to write up a formal estimate and sign it. Then I called the county utility inspector. His name was Frank Delgado, and I had worked with him years ago when I was still with the power company. Frank was a meticulous man in his early 60s, with thick glasses and a quiet voice that could make contractors sweat. He agreed to come out the next day and do an official inspection. I didn't tell Karen. I didn't tell the HOA. I just kept adding papers to the folder. The next morning, I walked out to the tunnel entrance at 7:30 and found a golf cart already coming through. The driver was a man in his 70s, wearing a visor and a golf glove. He slowed down when he saw me standing in the tunnel, and he gave me a friendly wave. "Morning," he said. "Shortcut's a lifesaver, isn't it?" I stepped in front of the cart. "This is private property," I said. "This tunnel is not open to the public." The man looked confused. Karen said it was a community access path now. She sent out a map and everything. I felt my jaw tighten. "What map?" I asked. He reached into the cup holder of his cart and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a printed map of Oakhaven Estates, with the golf cart paths highlighted in green. And there, drawn in red marker, was a line going straight through my hill, labeled Shortcut to Clubhouse. At the bottom of the map, in bold letters, it said, "Approved by HOA President Karen Whitmore." I took a photo of the map with my phone. Then I asked the man his name. He told me it was Harold Pemberton, and he lived on Fairway Drive. I wrote it down. I asked him to please turn around and exit the tunnel the way he came. He looked annoyed but complied. I watched his cart disappear back through the tunnel, and then I walked to my workshop and added the photo of the map to my folder. The map was the smoking gun. Karen hadn't just cut the lock. She had drawn a map, printed it, distributed it, and told the entire neighborhood that my private service tunnel was a community shortcut. She had put it in writing. She had signed her name to it. She had handed out copies. I almost laughed. I had spent 20 years in the utility industry, and I had seen contractors get sued into bankruptcy for disturbing unmarked utility lines. Karen had not only disturbed them, she had organized a parade of golf carts through a corridor packed with buried infrastructure. And she had done it without a single permit, a single survey, or a single call to 811. She had no idea what she had done, but she was about to find out. Frank Delgado arrived at 10 o'clock. He was carrying a clipboard and a digital camera, and he spent 45 minutes inside the tunnel, photographing every inch of the damage. He measured the shattered conduit, documented the exposed fiber line, and tested the control cable with a handheld meter. He shook his head the whole time. "Daniel," he said, "this is a mess. The fiber line is a dedicated trunk for the neighborhood's broadband service. It runs through your tunnel because your grandfather granted an easement to the phone company in 1956. If that line gets severed, half of Oak Haven loses internet. I knew that. I had known it since I was a teenager, helping my grandfather patch the conduit after a heavy rain. The easement was recorded, the lines were mapped, and the tunnel was clearly marked as private utility access on every county document. Karen hadn't checked any of it. Frank wrote up his report on the spot. He cited violations of county utility protection ordinances, unauthorized access to a private utility corridor, and failure to call for line locates before disturbing buried infrastructure. He estimated the total liability at a minimum of $15,000, not counting potential fines from the State Utility Commission. He handed me a copy of the report and told me he would be filing it with the county that afternoon. I added the report to my folder. The folder was getting thick now. I had the security footage, the still frames of Karen cutting the lock, the photo of her printed map, Harold Pemberton's name and statement, Mike's repair estimate, Frank's inspection report, and a copy of the original 1954 utility map from my safe. The map showed every line in the tunnel, including a high-voltage feeder cable that ran along the ceiling, encased in steel conduit. That cable was still live. It powered my workshop and part of the neighborhood's street lighting system. If a golf cart had hit that cable hard enough, it could have caused a fire or an electrocution. Karen had turned my tunnel into a death trap, and she had done it with a smile and a printed map. I decided it was time to let her explain it to the people who mattered. I called the HOA management office and asked to be placed on the agenda for the next board meeting. The woman on the phone sounded surprised. The meetings were usually for members only, but I reminded her that the agenda was public under state law, and I had a matter of urgent community safety to discuss. She put me on the schedule for Thursday evening at 7. I didn't tell her what the matter was. I just said it involved utility infrastructure and potential liability for the association. She typed something into her computer and told me I would have 10 minutes. I said 10 minutes would be more than enough. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a large room with vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the golf course. I arrived at 6:45 and took a seat in the back. The room was about half full, maybe 30 people, mostly retirees and a few younger couples. Karen was sitting at the front table with 4 other board members. She was wearing a white blazer and holding a gavel, which I found almost comical. She looked confident. She looked like a woman who had never been told no in her life. The meeting started with routine business, minutes from the last meeting, treasurer's report, landscaping updates, a complaint about a barking dog. Then Karen called my name. "Mr. Cross," she said, with a tight smile. "You're on the agenda. What can we do for you?" I stood up and walked to the front of the room. I was carrying my folder. I set it on the table and opened it slowly. "I'm here to discuss the service tunnel on my property," I said. "The one you cut the lock off last Thursday." The room went quiet. Karen's smile flickered. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. I pulled out the still frame from my security camera. It showed her, in perfect clarity, holding bolt cutters and cutting the lock off my tunnel door. The timestamp was visible. The HOA logo on her cart was visible. Her face was visible. I held it up for the room to see. "This is you, Karen," I said. "Thursday, 2:47 p.m. You cut my lock, propped the door open, and drove through my tunnel. Then you drew a map and handed it out to the neighborhood." I pulled out the photo of Harold's map, with the red line and the approved by HOA President Karen Whitmore text. I held that up too. A murmur went through the room. One of the board members, a man with gray hair and glasses, leaned forward and looked at the photo. "Karen, what is this?" he asked. Karen's face had gone pale. "That tunnel is a community access path," she said. "It's been there for years. It's a shortcut to the clubhouse. It's not hurting anyone." I shook my head. "That tunnel is private service access," I said. "It was built by my grandfather in 1954 to run maintenance equipment to his workshop. It contains buried utility lines, including a live high-voltage feeder cable. It is not a cart path. It is not a shortcut. It is not open to the public." I pulled out Frank Delgado's inspection report and handed a copy to each board member. "This is a county utility inspection report," I said. "It documents shattered conduit, exposed fiber optic lines, a damaged well pump control cable, and multiple violations of state utility protection laws. The estimated liability is $15,000, not including fines." The room was completely silent now. Karen's mouth was open. One of the board members was reading the report with a look of growing horror. I pulled out the original 1954 utility map. This map, I said, has been filed with the county for almost 70 years. It shows every line in that tunnel. It shows the easements, the voltages, the depths, and the access restrictions. None of you had permission to enter that tunnel. None of you had permission to drive golf carts through it. And none of you had the right to distribute a map encouraging others to do the same. I looked directly at Karen. You cut the lock, I said. You drew the map. You told the neighborhood it was approved. And now the HOA is facing thousands of dollars in repairs, potential fines from the state, and liability for any injuries that could have occurred. The gray-haired board member stood up. Is this true? He asked Karen. Did you do this? Karen's voice was shaking. I was just trying to help people get to the clubhouse faster, she said. The old route takes forever. I thought the tunnel was abandoned. It's not abandoned, I said. It's private. It's mapped. And it's full of live utilities. You didn't check. You didn't call 811. You didn't ask permission. You just cut the lock and handed out maps. A woman in the audience stood up. She was holding a copy of the map. I drove through that tunnel 3 times last week, she said. Are you telling me I was breaking the law? You were trespassing on private property and disturbing a protected utility corridor, I said. But the real responsibility lies with the person who told you it was okay. I pointed at Karen. The room erupted. People started talking over each other. The board members were huddled together, whispering urgently. Karen was trying to speak, but no one was listening. The gray-haired board member banged the gavel and called for order. He looked at me with a pained expression. Mr. Cross, he said, what do you want? I closed my folder. I want the tunnel sealed, I said. I want a new lock installed, paid for by the HOA. I want the repairs to the utility lines covered in full. I want a written admission from the board that the tunnel is private property and not open to community use. And I want Karen Whitmore to explain to the county inspector why she distributed a map encouraging people to disturb buried utility lines without a permit. The board member nodded slowly. I think that's reasonable, he said. Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is ridiculous, she shouted. It's just a tunnel. It's not a big deal. The gray-haired board member turned to her. Karen, he said, you cut a lock, distributed an unauthorized map, and exposed the HOA to thousands of dollars in liability. Sit down. Karen sat down. Her face was red. Her hands were shaking. She looked like she wanted to scream, but she didn't say another word. The board voted unanimously to accept my terms. They agreed to pay for the repairs, seal the tunnel, install a new lock, and issue a written statement acknowledging my private property rights. They also agreed to cooperate fully with the county investigation. The meeting adjourned at 8:30. As I was walking out, Harold Pemberton stopped me. He looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. That's why I brought the map. The map was the key. It proved that Karen had knowingly directed people through the tunnel. It proved that she had claimed authority she didn't have. And it proved that the HOA was responsible for everything that happened after she cut that lock. The next morning, a crew from Mike's company arrived to repair the conduit. They worked for 2 days, replacing the shattered pipe, splicing the fiber line, and testing the control cable. The total bill came to just over $4,000, and the HOA paid it within a week. Frank Delgado filed his report with the county, and the State Utility Commission opened an investigation. Karen was fined $1,200 personally for failing to call 811 before disturbing buried lines. The HOA was fined an additional $5,000 for failing to supervise its president. The board held an emergency meeting and voted to censure Karen. She wasn't removed as president, but her authority was significantly reduced. The board took away her ability to issue maps, approve shortcuts, or make any decisions about community access without a full vote. The tunnel was sealed with a new steel door and a heavy-duty lock that would take more than bolt cutters to break. I installed a new security camera pointed directly at the entrance, with a sign that read, Private Utility Access. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. The golf cart traffic stopped immediately. A few neighbors grumbled about the longer route to the clubhouse, but most of them were more upset with Karen than with me. The map had made her the villain. She had put her name on it. She had handed it out. She had told everyone it was approved. And when the truth came out, she had no one to blame but herself. I still have the folder. It's in my workshop, next to my wife's stool. It contains the security footage, the photos, the inspection report, the repair estimate, the county fines, and the original 1954 utility map. Sometimes I take the map out and look at it. It's yellowed and fragile, with my grandfather's handwriting in the margins. He drew every line himself. He knew exactly what was buried in that hill. And now, thanks to that map, everyone else knows too. Karen still lives in her stucco house on the golf course. I see her sometimes when I drive to the hardware store. She doesn't wave anymore. She doesn't smile. She just looks away. I don't feel sorry for her. She cut my lock. She broke my conduit. She endangered my property and my memories. And she did it all because she wanted to save people a few minutes on the way to the clubhouse. The tunnel is quiet now. The tire marks have faded. The new lock gleams in the sun. And every time I walk through that steel door, I hear the echo of my wife's voice. And I know that some things are worth protecting. Some things are worth fighting for. And some people need to learn that a map can cut both ways.